Perfect prompt. Thank you, Rebecca. We'll start with introductions, and that will include CAAB board members, Clark County team members, and guests, and then we'll move into the agenda. And I do want to let people know, per the Open Public Meetings Act, this meeting is being offered both in person at the Health Building and also virtually. And with that, I'm Alicia Topper, Clark County Treasurer, and I'm filling the seat of the elected position and am chair of the CAAB, at least for today. So with that, go ahead, Rebecca. We'll start with CAAB member introductions.
Thank you. Councilor Diana Perez.
Hello, everyone. Diana Perez here. First time joining you. Yay. Councilor Kim Harless and I had to do some switching around. And so I am now your new representative here for the City of Vancouver. Happy to be here with all of you. Thank you.
Welcome. We're happy to have you. Karen Kamarov.
Hello. Hi, Diana. This is Karen Kamarov. I'm a low-income community representative. I think I'm in District 2 now. And I'm just excited to see that Diana has joined us.
Rob Perkins.
I'm Rob Perkins, elected member from District 3. Is it still District 3?
Yes.
Also excited to see Diana with us.
Amy Rourke.
And I'm the community member for District 1.
We have a guest today, Talia McDade O'Neill.
Hi, I'm Talia McDade O'Neill with SHARE's Affordable Housing and Stability Program.
And staff we have today, I'm Rebecca Royce, staff to the Community Action Advisory Board. Beth Landry.
Good morning, everyone. Beth Landry, she, her, with Clark County and the Homeless Crisis Response System Coordinator.
Michael Torres.
Good morning, everyone. Michael Torres, Program Manager with Clark County Community Services, he, him.
Alyssa Page.
Morning, everyone. Alyssa Page. I'm part of the finance unit, and I manage these funds as well as some other funds for the county.
Janet Snook.
Present.
And Willie Traub.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Willie Traub. I'm a member of the finance unit with the Department of Community Services.
And Alicia, I'll let you know if we hit quorum so that we can approve the September minutes.
Thank you, Rebecca. And Rebecca Royce, she manages the CAAB board and works for community services. All right, thank you everyone for those introductions and welcome, Diana. We're so happy to have you. We'll go ahead and skip over the second item on the agenda this morning since we don't have quorum, and we'll move right into our presentation from SHARE on the HCRS program, which is the Housing and Shelter Program. With that, we'll go ahead and turn the floor over to our guests. Welcome.
Hi, everyone. Like I just said, my name is Talia McDade O'Neill, and I'm the Assistant Program Director for the Affordable Housing and Stability Program, which is one of the programs that is within SHARE. Next slide, please. So this morning, I'm just going to be going over some of our shelter programs, including Link in Place, the program that I help run with a little bit more emphasis on the Housing and Essential Needs program. I'll also be going over some case manager and client accomplishments with space for question and answer. Next, please. So our agency has 5 different shelter programs. Our most commonly known one is Share House, the men's shelter downtown. It has 30 beds, 2 respite rooms contracted through Peace Health, with 25 additional beds available for a transitional housing program. The shelter also is the only one for single men in Clark County. The program also holds our hot meals program there in the kitchen. And on site, we do have engagement specialists and housing navigators for the residents that reside there. We have 2 family shelters, so Share Homestead and Share Orchards Inn. Homestead is located in the Hazelwood area and Orchards in the Orchards area. Both shelters have 13 family rooms, 1 room for single women, and 2 respite rooms contracted through Peace Health. Both are owned by VHA but operated by Share. And both locations also have engagement specialists around the clock and housing navigators there during the day to help the households. Some of the families do have funding sources attached, but most do not and look to find housing on their own. We also have the women's shelters, so the Women's Housing and Transition Program, also referred to as the WHAT. It is with partnership with St. Luke's Church. It has 6 rooms, 3 beds per room for 18 women. It is funded by Clark County and operated by Share. That program also has engagement specialists and a housing navigator on site for support. Our last shelter is the WHO, which is the Winter Hospitality Overflow Program, and is open from November to March every year. The WHO is a partnership of Share, Council for the Homeless, and the faith-based community located at St. Andrew and St. Paul Lutheran churches. The single women, couples without kids, and families are placed at St. Andrews, about 50 individuals, and then single men are placed at St. Paul's through Outsiders Inn, which houses about 24. Slide, please. Our agency also has Lincoln Place, which is right next to Share House downtown. It is a permanent supportive housing and houses some of the most vulnerable individuals in Clark County. It is owned and managed by the VHA, and Share manages the programs internally. It's a 30-unit studio apartment building, and residents there pay 30% of their gross income towards rent. There's also on-site case management services around the clock. We do have a partnership with CDM Caregiving Services there. So CDM helps residents at Lincoln Place with some of the things that the case managers cannot. So learning daily living and independent skills, from laundry tips and cooking techniques to cleaning and organizing, to advocating for medical and healthcare, accessing food boxes, prescriptions, and maintaining their units to be a safe place and habitable place to live. Next slide, please. And then next, I'll go over my program. So we are the Affordable Housing and Stability Program, formerly known as Aspire. Way back then, I will go over the rental tenant education program, some of our share-owned properties, and then as well as transitional and permanent housing. Slide. The Rentwell program is a partnership with Transition Projects in Portland. It's 12 sections of material spanning over 6 weeks of courses. It's a tenant education course taught in Clark County, both virtually and in-person classes, which we just moved towards at the beginning of the year. It is currently taught by a program coordinator and case managers. With COVID, we did have to step away from community partners because they weren't able to teach the courses, but now we're getting back out into the community and building relationships again. Graduates receive a certificate and access to the Landlord Incentive Program, which allows them to enroll and the landlord to access the fund to cover costs that occur if someone leaves their unit early or with damages. Students taking the course learn to identify and address their rental barriers, understand their rights and responsibilities as a tenant, and also learn about what it takes to apply for a unit, maintain the unit, and move out successfully. We also have a handful of homes that Share owns. So we have 3 shared living homes for men and women. These units are where the residents have their own rooms and share the living spaces with others. All residents in the homes are on a fixed income. We do have 1 duplex that houses 2 families and 1 single home for a family. Rent at these units are not subsidized, but offered at a lower rate to help residents stabilize, maintain, and identify what permanent housing looks like for them. More commonly, we see residents get into the units while they're waiting for like their VHA voucher to kick in, and then are able to transition to a space for them. Case management Services are provided through our case managers and properties are maintained by Real Best Property Management. Slide, please. And then next is our permanent housing and transition program. So within the last year and a half, our staff have nearly doubled. We currently have Katie Lewis as our program director, who came to us from Share House almost 2 years ago, and then me as their assistant program director. I started with Share back in 2018 as a case manager and then moved into this role around the same time that Katie did. We have 3 lead case managers for our rapid rehousing, permanent supportive housing, and housing and essential needs program. These lead case managers help support their team with administrative work, case management support, and program support. This is something new that we recently had put into place. We've never had leads before, but as our team was growing and as our program was growing, we realized they need a lot more support than just what Katie and I can offer. And so we put the leads into place. We currently have 16 case managers in our program, each carrying a caseload between 15 and 25 households, depending on their funding source. We have 3 housing navigators, which is really exciting. So those housing navigators assist the clients from the very beginning with helping them find and locate housing. And then we also recently added a data collection and reconciliation specialist that is able to help with like the money side of requesting the rents and our data entry. And then as well as our rent well coordinator. So we're a pretty big team right now. We have the rapid rehousing program with multiple funding sources, each varying in lengths. Some of our programs redetermine eligibility every 3 months, 6 months, or 3 months, 6 months, or 12 months. And where portions are determined by 30% of their gross annual income. Next, we have our permanent supportive housing program. To be eligible for the PSH program, clients have to have a verified disability by a professional and have 12 months of documented homelessness. We have a mixture of leasing and rental assistance clients. So with leasing, Share is the leaseholder and we then sublease to the client. We pay full rent and the client pays their portions to us. Rental assistance, the lease is in their name and they pay their portion to the landlord. And of their annual gross income. And then the Housing and Essential Needs Program is the program I'm going to be spending a little bit more time on because we are the only community agencies that have this program. Please. So the Housing and Essential Needs Program is one of our biggest. They are considered a rapid rehousing program, but for our agency, we have them split into kind of their own category because of the support that is needed to run it. The program provides rapid rehousing case management, rapid housing assistance and case management to households who are homeless, as well as support with housing navigation for the length of time that they are eligible. We currently have 126 individuals in our HEN program. Some of them are still in the housing search process, but we do have the largest amount of clients in this program. To be eligible for HEN, you have to be deemed as permanently or temporarily disabled. So these households are individuals who are typically in the process of applying for Social Security. Eligibility is determined through the Washington State Department of Social and Health Services, so DSHS, and referred to the Housing Solutions Center for coordinated entry and assessment. The Housing Solutions Center is the only entry point for this program. Years ago, we used to be the entry point for the HEN program, but that has been shifted with the growth. At program entry, HEN clients only need proof of their HEN referral, and income documentation is not required. Housing stability plans are used across the board for all of our programs and clients. These plans are created at program entry and utilized until they exit the program. We consider the housing stability plans to be a living document that is constantly being reviewed and adjusted. Housing stability plans consist of short, mid, and long-term goals that are created with the client and case manager. All goals created are things that will help the household move towards housing stability and self-sufficiency. We have found that talking about goals with the clients can be very scary for them because they often aren't used to like talking about goals or things that they want to do beyond the next couple of days. And so that's when our case managers use their strength-based approaches to work with the clients and breaking down the task into something more realistic. Things on the housing stability plan range from obtaining income documents and identification, establishing a primary care provider, contacting medical transport, medication management. Some other topics include employment, mental health services, budgeting, obtaining permanent housing, as well as resources and referrals to other services in the community that can help meet the household needs. Because our clients are coming from homelessness, a majority of them have been focusing all of their energy on surviving and not having the space or time to get their other basic needs met, which is why the housing stability plan have a wide range of goals. For our programs with families, we also like to include all members of the household to get everybody invested and on board with the plan. Rental assistance for HEN includes rooms, trailers, apartments, houses, RVs, campers, manufactured homes, and any type of dwelling designed for human habitation. All units have to pass a housing habitability standards inspection beforehand, though. We are able to pay for renters insurance for clients if it is required per lease, and clients in the HEN program can also receive utility assistance for their units. This program can pay for other things related to moving a client in, so security deposits, utility deposits, application fees, background checks. One thing that sets this program apart from some of the others is the ability to pay for hotel motel cost for up to 90 days. There are steps that need to be taken in order for this to happen, but it has really benefited our clients and has allowed them to gain some stability while they're working with our team to find housing. We also have 5 properties that we master lease for shared living situations. We have 4 units that can house up to 6 individuals each, and then a home that is a 3-bedroom. So the clients in these homes are usually clients who have significant barriers that we're not able to house right away or quickly because they need more support, more documentation and application process. Another thing that sets this program apart from some of our others is the ability to provide essential needs and flex funds assistance to the household. Essential needs includes personal health, food and hygiene items, and household cleaning supplies. So their toothpaste, toilet paper, laundry soap, shampoo, many of the things that we don't think twice about buying for ourselves, but for someone on a low fixed income, these are things that meet their basic needs and that they need to survive. This program also allows for bus passes, gas vouchers, and laundry cards, which is great. And flex fund assistance includes things that directly help a household to obtain or maintain permanent housing or meets their essential household needs. So things like court legal fees we're able to pay for, clothing, moving costs, or payment to address other barriers that have interfered with their housing stability. Clients in this program have the ability to request a reasonable accommodation when there is a barrier due to a disability, preventing them from effectively gaining equal access to services. Our programs share common goals for how we want things to be ran, and some of those things is treating people with dignity and respect. So we have identified some ways that we will carry this out, which include but are not limited to consistently implementing practices to meet people where they are and provides person-centered care that focuses on personal strengths, treating individuals with dignity and respect in every interaction that we have with them, providing people we serve with a grievance process, serving individuals in a trauma-informed manner, providing choice, transparency, a clear explanation of role, flexibility, and accommodation whenever possible or whenever requested. Ensuring that services provided are client-directed and respectful of individuals' right to self-determination, as well as practicing cultural competency and providing appropriate accommodations for program participants across demographic differences. It is very important to us that we have this in place and that we hold each other accountable with the way that we want to treat one another and how we will carry that out. Our agency is operated through the Housing First approach. So this means that we have minimum expectations or requirements of the people seeking assistance. We aren't going to screen households out of the program for things like having too little income or no income, having poor credit or financial history, being involved in the criminal justice system, and especially not for having active or a history of substance or alcohol use, which is one of the biggest things that we see in our household, especially recently. Households who enter a program are assigned a housing navigator to assist with helping them find housing, and a case manager who is involved in housing placement and every part after. The case manager works with the households to identify needs that they may have and then help them move towards getting those needs met. Because our program mainly offers housing stability support, we are constantly referring and providing resources to agencies and community members that may be able to address the needs that we cannot fill. Our case managers spend a majority of their time out in the field, whether that is at the client's home or at a space in the community with them where they are comfortable. One of our goals is to help our clients stabilize in their housing, and by meeting them where they're at allows us to do that. So lastly, I wanted to share just a couple case manager and client accomplishments that we've had recently in our program. One of them is an individual who was in and out of shelter for the last 2 years. She was very motivated and determined to get back up on her feet, but was facing a lot of medical things that wasn't allowing her to do that. So she did come into our program at the end of last year and was housed shortly after. At the time, she was considered short-term disabled, but was eager to get back to work. Some of the barriers she encountered was limited income, employment, and transportation. Once housed, she was able to just settle down and focus on getting housed, getting her medical procedures done, using that space to get her physical therapy done and recover. After recovery, she had like this spark in her, like she was ready to go, ready to get back on her feet, and ended up getting reemployed back at her previous employer who had to let her go because of physical limitations. So with that, our agency was able to buy her some of the equipment she needed for her job. And then, of course, another barrier that came up was her transportation. So she had limitations in that situation. She needed to be able to drive to job sites that were not normally on the bus line, as well as working late or early hours, and needed to go to places that usually she had to take the highway to. We're able to assist her with renewing her tags so that she could safely get there, legally get there, and working on helping her complete her car repairs so that she could have reliable transportation to get to her place of employment so she could sustain. So by addressing these few things, she's now in a place where she very soon won't need our rental assistance and will exit the program into stable housing that she can maintain on her own. We also in the last couple of years have noticed a significant increase in clients who struggle with collecting items or hoarding behaviors. So resources for assisting individuals with these tendencies we have found are kind of rare in our community or cost money that the clients don't have. And we have had a case manager recently get approval through Flex Funds to have an outside organizing agency come in and work with this client. It did take a lot of work up front because it is a very sensitive topic to our clients. And so the case manager did a lot of motivational interviewing, just really building rapport to get to the house, to get the household to a place where they were able to have outside people come in. So this tremendously helps with our housing stability. It provides her a safe place to live. It will address any barriers that may come down the line from her landlord or property management in concern with her unit. And in our affordable housing and stability program, we are constantly encouraging all staff and clients, and even with their own coworkers, to celebrate any small victories that they may have or accomplishments, no matter what the size, because something that may be small to us is really big for them. So that's something that we're constantly doing within our team. Next slide. So I did want to thank you all for just giving me the space to share a little bit about our programs. I could go a lot more into depth about each and every one of them, but a lot of them are very repetitive. So that's why I chose the hen one. But I do appreciate the opportunity to share some information, and I have my contact information up here in case there is any need for reaching out. Are there any questions that I may be able to answer? Any comments?
So much. Great presentation. And this is an opportunity for CAAB board members to ask questions. Feel free to unmute yourself and fire away.
So I had a question. It's Bridget McLeeman. The rapid rehousing, after that title, it said transitional housing. And I wondered how long people were in for, you know, whether it was a transitional shelter or whether it was just transitional help finding housing. So can you explain that a little more?
So we refer to it as transitional housing because it's not permanent. So it's getting them into a space and transitioning them to being on their own. That is kind of an umbrella term that we use for our funding sources, because some of our funding sources are capped out at 24 months of rental assistance, while others are based on eligibility that is redetermined every 3 months or every 6 months. And so as long as they're eligible at time of recertification, so if they're still in need of our services and they don't surpass the area median income threshold that we have, then they can continue to seek our services and be in the program. That answer, I know it's kind of.
Well, thank you. No, that helps. So I just want to understand, it's not housing in a shelter, it's housing in one of your other owned or leased properties?
So clients in our permanent supportive and rapid housing transitional programs, they carry the lease in their own name, and they can be anywhere within Clark County that meets as long as the unit meets the criteria. So we have certain fair market rents we have to abide to, and inspections that have to be done. But we have a couple property managements that we work very well with. But for the most part, there's no limitations on the places and the units, the places they can rent from.
Thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome.
Thank you for coming and presenting this. It was really fleshed things out for me to hear the details that you offered to us. I want to ask about Rentwell.
Yeah.
My little note says, who is it for? It's in connection with, is it for anyone who needs advice and information about how to manage their leases and so forth? Or is it focused explicitly on the homeless?
No, it could be for anybody. We have people who, we call them students. We have students that come to us, like some from like Clark College, some from our shelters who are, working towards being a better tenant. It's open to the whole community in Clark County. There's not really any thing that would make them not eligible for the program. But it's just a tenant education course that goes over, some people would say like some like pretty self-explanatory stuff, but for some of our students it's not. So like communication on how to properly communicate with people, how to present yourself, how to advocate for yourself, and just giving them ins and outs of what's in a rental lease, things that they might have never had the opportunity to learn or have been shown.
Is it like the old Ready to Rent program?
I do not know that ready to rent program, but it could be.
It's like basically teaching them things like how to communicate with your landlord and how to fix your credit and
Yep.
all that
Yeah,
stuff.
so we go over credit reports, how to read them. Because a lot of students haven't never seen their credit reports or thought things were off and they weren't, and so on.
What I'm then wondering is whether or not our high schools should be teaching seniors.
That's what I was thinking when I did it. I was like, I wish I would have learned this in high school.
Yeah, we are constant. So right now, what our rental coordinator Guadalupe is doing is she has like a list of like 15 agencies that she is connecting with, and I'm constantly adding like things to that. Like, hey, reach out to them. Like, we work really well with them. We could like all benefit from this, and I don't see like why not. It would just be getting our foot into the door and getting them on board.
So yeah, because I'm kind of thinking of this in terms of like the contemporary world problems class, whatever the CWI,
Yeah.
the senior level civics courses, or AP economics, even that kind of thing. Whether the material could be supplied to those teachers to include in their pedagogy curriculum.
There is opportunity for anybody to really become an instructor in the course. It does cost, but once you have that instructor certification, you can teach the course on your own.
And what kind of linkage would you need with the districts in order to supply that?
I think contact information, knowing who to go to first, because there's so many departments to navigate.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. That sounds great.
Just curious about another question here. You said
Go ahead.
for the HEN program, people do the inspections for rooms and trailers and stuff like that. Who does that inspection? Like I know housing.
Our staff did. Yeah, so the housing habitability standards inspection is a 2-page inspection that goes over the unit. We do have a part of our HEN program to where if any like habitability concerns are brought up by anybody, then we do have a longer inspection that our agency will go and do it on the unit as well.
Thank you for that question. I have a lot of questions, but I'll just start with a couple. I'm really curious about that housing habitability standard, what that looks like. You know, what is the standard?
Yes.
And then I'm curious about well, first of all, that housing habitability standard, is that for permanent supportive housing, like at the Lincoln Place, or is it just in a particular location?
And to build on Diana's question, I'm assuming that habitability standard is predicated on your funder, so HUD and housing standards.
Yes.
Okay.
So our CHG and our ESG programs use the housing habitability, and then the rest of our programs use the housing quality standards, the HQS.
Oh, okay. Yes. Yeah. So is that for permanent housing, permanent supportive housing? Or I'm trying to.
Oh, just for the rapid.
Oh, it's just for the rapid. Okay. Is there the standard for permanent supportive housing for those living like at
So
Lincoln
we
Place?
kind of refer to it as like the housing habitability standards is like the shorter kind of 2-pager. The housing quality standards goes more like room by room. So it's a little bit longer.
Hey, this
Okay.
is Michael Torres. Could I answer this? Because I could probably do like answer it a little bit more clearly than Talia. And Talia, you're
Thanks,
doing a really
Michael.
good job. Me jumping in here is not a reflection of that.
Yeah.
So there are 2 basic housing standards that are applied. One is from HUD, the U.S. Department of Housing and Urban Development, and that's the the housing quality standards known as HQS. The second one is from the state, and that's the housing habitability standards. And it's also pretty extensive. It's a little bit less extensive than HUD's. And it isn't by the type of intervention. It's not whether it's a permanent supportive housing or rapid rehousing. It's just if the funding source is funding housing, that the respective habitability standard is going to apply. So things like, basically VHA properties like Lincoln Place that are going to use the federal funds, or even rental assistance that uses tenant-based rental assistance funds, from home or CDBG, they're going to use HQS. And anything that's funded with funds that we are getting from the state is going to use housing habitability. So it isn't by intervention or rapid rehousing or PSH. It's by the funding source. And if our funding sources funds that housing, that's what's going to apply.
Got you. Thank you, Michael.
Thank
And then
you.
I did, maybe at some point I can follow up with you separately. The grievance process, I was curious about that. Is that also for tied to the funding, like you mentioned, Michael, or is that in particular for permanent supportive housing? Just wanted to get a better understanding of that grievance process and what the type of grievances you get and
I think
the outcome of
sure.
addressing those grievances.
I think Talia would probably do a good job in terms of like the details of what kind of grievances they get and stuff like that. I will just share that just like it's not based on the intervention type, all county contracts for any of our human services, whether they're homelessness or anti-poverty, they require the service provider to have a grievance process in place and available to clients. And they report to us, and we report to the CAAB on the client satisfaction surveys, including grievance process information every year.
So because it is required by some of our contracts, we just have it across the board for our whole agency. So anybody who is getting services from any program within our whole agency has the right to grieve any decisions that are made on their case that they do not agree with. We have recently changed this language from grievance to solutions request. So this at program entry in our program, all clients are notified of the solutions request policy. And then anytime, most times when you send out certain letters, we include a copy of the solutions request. So what our process is that clients can email us their solutions request. They can write it to us, put it in the mail. They can say it to any one of our staff, and it's our staff's responsibility to record their solutions request and give it to the appropriate party. So for our program, they go straight to Katie Lewis, the director, to resolve, and we have timeframes on when we have to resolve them and reach out to the parties involved. And then if it's not met there, it then goes up to the next person and then to the next. A majority of our grievances are probably just miscommunications or misunderstandings about things that were said. And so we usually just provide a space, for communication to be had. But in our solutions request, we also give the clients the opportunity to write how they would like it, resolved, to give them input because it is regarding them and it's their voice.
And is there a process to address accessibility and language barriers within that?
Yes, so we work with Columbia Languages or so we try to like catch that before it even gets to the grievance process, because we do want to be able to work with all of our clients no matter what they come with. And so I guess long answer short, yeah, they do have they can grieve anything.
And I can add to that, Diana, all of our programs are required to have access to language interpretation, either by having staff on hand that talk in the native language of their clients or accessing outside services to be able to provide that so that we can provide as much documentation and conversation in the household's native language.
Okay. Has there been much need for that? Or has it been
For our
used?
program. Our biggest one right now is probably the Chuukese population and that language. But we have a couple of staff in our building and then one on our own program, a case manager, and then some at the shelter that also speak that language, so they're able to help. We have 5 Spanish-speaking staff, including a receptionist, which is great. But the ones recently that we've had to get assistance with is like ASL or the Russian language.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Any other questions from members of the CAB? Okay, all right. Great dialogue, great questions. Thank you so
thank
much
you.
for the presentation. Thanks for joining
Thank
us.
you guys. Yep, thank you. Have a good rest of your day.
So we're going to go ahead and take a step back in our agenda. We had 2 more board members join us this morning. Thank you for being here, Lance Carter, and also Bridget McClellan. So with that, I would entertain a motion to approve our minutes from the September 2022 meeting.
So
I
moved.
move to, we'll have a competition about who gets to move for that.
No, I was going to apologize for being late. Go ahead.
Thank you. I think I heard Rob Perkins make a motion, and I think Karen was right on his heels, so we'll count that as a second. Does that sound fair?
Yes.
Okay, so we have a motion and a second on the floor to approve our September 2022 minutes. Any discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor of approving our minutes, say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, same sign. Thank you. Okay, I think those are all ayes, so the minutes are approved unanimously. Thank you so much. Our next presentation this morning, or a report and update, is from the City of Vancouver regarding their Affordable Housing Fund and their homeless services update. Is Samantha or Jamie with us this morning?
I'm here. Good morning. This is Sam.
Good morning.
Well, the Affordable Housing Fund, not a lot of updates since the last time I informed you. The council did approve putting it on the February ballot. So our communications team is working on getting information out to city residents about the Proposition 3 and also about we've been having ongoing conversations and report outs about the existing Affordable Housing Fund and its accomplishments. So one update I have for you on our CDBG and home application process. We got in all of our pre-applications this week. We advertised that we expected about 4.5 million to be awarded this spring. And we received 44 pre-applications requesting just over $10 million. So it'll be a very competitive process this year. Not necessarily all of the pre-applications will move forward to the full application stage, but we're reviewing those now and working with agencies to make sure that their applications are ready to go and be reviewed by our committee early in 2023. I think that's all I have for my updates, but I'm happy to answer any questions. And I'm not sure if Jamie is here. I don't know if I'm able to give a quality homeless services update in her absence, but we're working on that third safe stay on the downtown location. And you probably are aware of that from the Columbian articles that we have. Yeah, does anybody have any questions for me or anything else I can bring back?
Really glad the governor got to see the safe state. Really,
It's very nice of him to visit.
always learns something when he comes to Vancouver.
Right,
Thank you,
thank you
Sam.
guys.
Yeah, thanks. Okay. Okay, so let's see here. We're going to go ahead and move to our discussion about the CAAB executive team. So in our packets for this meeting, Rebecca included a description of the positions of the executive committee for the CAAB board. There will be an election coming up at our next board meeting, and it's open to all board members. And I believe in the description, you have to have been on the CAAB board for at least 1 year prior to being able to serve on the executive committee. As chair, I am terming out, so the chair position will be available to folks to apply for. And you can either self-nominate or you can be nominated by someone else. If anyone has any questions after reading the descriptions, you can feel free to reach out to Rebecca directly. That's typically the way that we get all of our quality and good information is through Rebecca. Anything you want to add, Rebecca, regarding the executive committee or our January board meeting that's coming up?
No, I do want to say there's a typo on the slide and I apologize. Our current vice chair is Amy Rourke, not David. David was our previous vice chair at the time. She has also served 1 year and is eligible to be nominated and stay in that position. But we will be looking for a new chair and new secretary for next year. And yeah, just contact me if you have any questions about the positions, and I'd be happy to answer them for you.
Thank you. And that board meeting will be on January 4th. So folks have time to consider if they want to serve in one of these leadership positions. Any questions from members of the CAAB regarding our nominations process for our executive team?
It'd be good to know what the time commitment is for an officer position above and beyond.
So the executive team reviews the agenda, provides feedback before every board meeting. So it could be just a matter of a few minutes. The executive team is typically also involved in if we have new board members, if we're doing advertisements, so reviewing resumes and applications, possibly doing interviews for those. We haven't had any new ones this year, so the executive team weren't involved. And I have a topic that we'll talk about with our open positions, but we have an executive team member that is actually up for reappointment. So Amy is one of them. So I wouldn't use the executive team in this position as the review committee, and we'll create a new review committee at this time because of that. So that could be a possibility for additional work, but there's not typically a lot of extra requirements outside of the chair running the meeting, the secretary signing off on the minutes once they've been adopted by or approved by the board. And then if there's any additional, opportunities to volunteer, but those are typically also open to the entire board.
And other items that might come up, Rob, if there's an item coming before the county council, usually the executive committee, someone would attend that meeting and maybe speak on behalf of the CAAB. And there might be other small things if you're serving as chair that would come up that you would be responsible for. But I would say in general, it isn't a massive time commitment. Obviously, we don't have monthly meetings, so it isn't as intense as some other board commitments.
Thank you.
Yeah, I highly encourage folks to run for the executive committee. It's a good public service. Okay, very good. We'll go ahead and move on to our next agenda item, which is a very exciting item. It is our finance reports. Turn it over to Rebecca.
Yeah, so when we drafted the agenda, our finance staff were not going to be able to be at the meeting today. They were called into a county council meeting, but that has been rescheduled. So as of yesterday, our finance staff are able to be here. So I'm going to turn it over to Alyssa and Willie and Rhonda so that they can talk about those reports.
Good morning, everyone. It's Alyssa Page, and I think I'm going to go through them, the expense and the revenue reports, and then Willie and Rhonda can jump in if there's anything specific to the programs that they manage for any additional information. But be forewarned, you're going to see a lot of information on the screen that's about to pop up, and I'll go through the basic information of what you're looking at, and then we can have some follow-up questions if anyone, questions the report or sees something that, they want to ask about. Okay, so what we're starting with, and this is our annual expense report. So these are expenses that run July 21 through June of 22. And the expense reports are broken out into the types of programs. So in this first section, you'll see the community action programs. On the left-hand side, you'll see the organization and the program name. So Partners in Careers, Clark College 211 Info. The annual report period, which for these, and I'm doing air quotes, normal funds, is a state fiscal year. You will see some different dates when we go to a different screen based on the funding source, because not everything runs on a state fiscal year for reporting. But to be able to break it out and show you the expenses, we are showing you expenses on a fiscal year. The green section is the type of funding that we have that are paying for these programs and what they've been spent out of. And the very last screen that we get to, we won't go there now, it will break out the acronyms and what each one stands for. So federal, state, local funds. The total contract amount, if you can scroll to the right a little bit, is in the blue. The total spent, balance remaining, and the percentage of the contract that's been spent. Now, if you don't see 100%, it could be because it is a 2-year contract, but we're only reporting on the first year. If it is just a 1-year contract and they're not spent out, those funds will be reallocated into future contracts. And then in the gray kind of line across, it tells you the type of assistance. So employment, income and asset building, information and referral, physical health and support services. Can you zoom back out a little bit, Rebecca, please? So next section is the homeless crisis response system, and that will go on for not this page, but the next page as well. Breakout is the same with the funding source, the type of service, the provider, and a description of the type of program.
I would like to add, Alyssa, the HB in front of some of those columns on funding is House Bill. So that was legislative action that was taken to provide funding.
Correct.
Funding.
Those are from our local document recording fees, and those funds do vary, and I'll explain a little bit more about that when we get to the revenue reports and how we collect and distribute the funds. Are there any questions about the expense reports, how it's laid out? These will be distributed and also on the community services website for people to view or download or make a copy if they'd like one. And I think what was there, over 150 contracts, I think. So there are about 8 pages of expenses listed. Go ahead, Rhonda.
I just wanted to make a general comment about the community action programs. All of them were 100% spent out, except for Clark College, which you all can probably imagine what it was like for their program when they were fully remote during COVID. So if you have any questions about why they did not spend out their contract, it just was very difficult for them to get that off the ground during that time. So I just wanted to. It's at 52% spent, and I figured there might have been some questions, so I thought I would get ahead of the curve on that one.
Perfect. And Rebecca, can you go up just one page? I had one more thing to say about the non-COVID related funds. If you look like for the Impact Northwest, that contract date starts 1/1 of 22. That's because we received some additional funds, our hotel leasing and rapid rehousing funds. We received those outside of a normal state fiscal year. They started in January of 2022. So you will see probably lower spending percentages, but as our other funds, they will roll in to hopefully 100% spent out all of our grant related funds. We do prioritize those first before spending our local House bill, the document recording fees, we do want to use our state and federal funds first. So after all of our state, local, federal funds, we then broke out a report into our COVID related funding, expenses, and contracts. So you'll see different funding sources across the top of this report. These are all COVID related funds. They are normally one time, not ongoing, like our regular state, local, and federal funds. Same setup as before. It's broken out by the organization program, contract period. You'll see some of these are backdated to 2020. And that's another reason why we kind of separated the regular funds from the COVID funds, because we are spending those outside of a normal state fiscal year. Same information is also over to the right about, the percent spent, contract periods, and where we're at on spending.
So you have dates under COVID funds through 2023?
Correct. Some of our COVID funds, like the ARPA funding, that was a 5-year award that was given to us. It's a federal award. And 100% of the amount of the ARPA funds, the county received the ARPA funds, and then they were distributed out to the different departments within the county. And that was a 5-year federal grant. And 100% of the funds that community services requested are put into contracts.
And that explains why percentages spent are smaller for some of these.
Correct.
Okay, thank you.
And then we also do prioritize that if we do have these ARPA funds for 5 years and we only have a state grant for 2 years and we are supporting the same type of program, we do of course want to spend our state funds, and then to extend the life of the program and to cover all services, we work the funds that we're not going to lose first.
That ARPA funding has a sunset date that it has to be spent down by, correct?
I believe so.
I think it's December 31st of 2024.
Yeah.
And some of our funds do have, you have to spend X amount of dollars by a certain date or you lose. All the different funds have different allowable expenses, how much you can spend or use on types of programs. Were there any questions at all about the expense reports before we move on to the revenue reports? And here's the list of the acronyms and what each one is standing for. And you'll see the HB is for House bill. It's also known as the document recording fees.
This is Diana. Is there a mechanism or process for identifying which percentages within that expenditure column, percent expenditure, would lead to a yellow flag or red flag of, and I recognize that it might vary because I'm just trying to figure out how we can see which ones, like for example, if the ARPA funds has to be spent by a certain date, is there a way to say, oh my God, we're halfway through ARPA and we've already spent 70% of it? And is that good? Is that where we want to be? So I was just wondering about
Right.
Alyssa, this Beth. Do you mind if I take that one?
Not at all. Go ahead.
Rebecca, feel free to add in anything for the CAAB side. So from the program perspective, what our program coordinators are, or one of the things that we're responsible for doing is monitoring that spending and monitoring the activity through invoicing, which occurs on a monthly basis. So generally speaking, we're looking at monthly invoices for spending trends, looking at that trend on a quarterly basis, and then keeping in mind the sunset date, as Alicia had mentioned, or the grant expiration date, doing some projections, and then we work with our finance unit to discuss where people should be at percentage-wise, if there's any known impacts, if there's an identified plan from the provider due to an identified impact. A lot of this centered around COVID impacts most recently, and changes to, staffing levels, shortages of staffing, inability to, have a full shelter space filled due to physical distancing requirements, things of that sort, and just how to accommodate during COVID. That's been the most recent discussion as far as spending impacts have gone. But generally monthly, quarterly, and then keeping in mind any timelines that we're working with, but it is an ongoing basis. So it's hard to give a general, here's where we'd like to see outside of if it's a year grant, we want to see 50% halfway through the year, kind of basic expenditures there. But our first priority is making sure that programs are in compliance with their contract, delivering services as required, and that we are not losing any funds for our community. So if there ever is a concern for significant underspending or performance for that regard, those are discussions that we have with the provider first. If we're not able to come up with a sustainable plan to get those funds out to our community, then we make adjustments to contracts as needed. And Rebecca, feel free to add anything in if there's anything else there.
And the only thing that I would also say, specifically for community action or anti-poverty programs, Share Hunger Response is one prime example, is that they often are funded by multiple sources. And so they use our funds first. So we would actually see that typically they're spent out of our funds within the first 6 months before they move on to their private donations. And using fundraised dollars for their programs. So we often see some programs spending out quite quickly, but the program is not ending for the entire contract period.
Hey, Rebecca, could I add one other thing? And would you mind scrolling up to the expense report so we can see the headers of the different types of funding sources? So the only thing I would add to what Beth and Rebecca said is we will also talk about it with the CAAB board if there is a specific contract or funding source where we're having a concern about performance or about expenditure. And, as an example of that today, Rhonda highlighting to you, hey, you will see that Clark County is at 52% in this program. This is why. So we will keep you updated on how, if we have any concerns and how those programs are moving forward. And also twice a year, not as part of the revenue and expense report, but Rebecca also provides report to the CAAB by contract on the outcomes reports for how the different contracts are doing. So you will see expenditures, and you will also see, are they hitting their contract targets as we were hoping to do. So the only other thing I wanted to highlight, and the reason Rebecca, I asked Rebecca to bring this up, please scroll to the left just a little bit, please. Thank you. That's fine. Is when you see House Bill, as Alicia mentioned, and as you see in the acronym list, House Bill is document recording fee. But I did want to highlight that all document recording fees covers several different funding sources. And there is a tendency when you hear document recording fees, you think they're all the same thing. They're covered by interlocal. And I just wanted to highlight within document recording fees, House Bill 2060 is the fund that is covered by interlocal between the county and the different cities. It is the only document recording fee that is covered by interlocal. It is the only document recording fee that legislatively is required to be covered by interlocal. So when a lot of the conversations that you hear about document recording fees and interlocal agreements and stuff like that, that's House Bill 2060. House Bill 2163, House Bill 1359, and any other House bill that you may see come up in the future are by legislation not covered by interlocal, but they go to the entity that is responsible for administering the homeless action plan within that jurisdiction. And the reason for that is that by legislation, those House Bill dollars are designated to operate the homeless action plan. So if for some reason a city in our jurisdiction decided they were going to operate their own homeless action plan, they would actually, and they notified the state, they would actually get their portion of House Bill 2163 and House Bill 1359. Only those dollars. So I just wanted to highlight that because this is an education opportunity, because there are pretty strong differences in the designation, the legislative designation of how those House bill dollars are supposed to be used between 2060, which is covered by interlocal, and 2163 and 1359. So I know there may be more questions, and that's not what the scope of this presentation is. And especially if you are a city councilor that has questions, I'm happy to enter in those discussions and provide training on the different kinds of House bills and rules around document recording fees. I just didn't want to, breeze over all this information and the takeaway be all document recording fees are the same. And there are 3 different funding sources that are being presented here for expenditure reports. Sorry, go ahead, Rebecca.
Surprise, surprise, you're presenting on the House bills training at the January meetings.
You didn't know that.
Perfect timing. Talk about that.
Perfect timing.
Thank you so much.
Yeah, and it's really important for all CAB members to remember, and I know we know this from our several trainings, but majority of our funding sources are restricted funds, and they're in these certain I call them pots of money, these certain categories, because they're mandated to be. So it's not like we can just move money to any program. Some funding has flexibility, but many of them are restricted. So I just want to say I think this report is clean and understandable, well organized. I love the color coding. I love the categorizing. I think you guys did a phenomenal job. Great job.
We have.
I want to agree, because I used to be very confused by the financial statements, and these are getting clearer and clearer every time we get them. Thank you.
I need the term covered by interlocal unpacked a little more.
So we can absolutely have that conversation. Amy's been waiting to ask.
Oh,
a
no,
question.
I just had this one here, like, it's page 5. It says Bridgeview Housing.
Yes.
And it says 500,000.
Yes.
And it says 005. So what?
Yes, so they actually have
Has
2,
seven.
they have 2 active contracts right now. One is for Treasury rent assistance and one is for Treasury emergency rent assistance. One is our direct allocation of funds from the Treasury. One is that went to the state and then to us. They are working through the funds in the one through the state that has both funding for VHA clients specifically, and also they do assistance to households that are calling in for assistance just in the general population. And so they're working through that one first, and then they're going to go into that extra funding. But it is, yes, they are working on that. So it is intentional that right now that it's $0. And then Rob, you had questions about the interlocal agreement.
The the term covered by interlocal.
So House Bill 2060, as Michael had explained, legislative requirement to have an interlocal agreement between the county as the primary receipt of the funds and all of the small cities within the county. So Vancouver, Richfield, La Center, Woodland, Washougal, or not Woodland, Washougal, Camas, Yakul. And so there's an agreement, memorandum of or interlocal agreement or memorandum of understanding between us and each of those agencies that to oversee the House Bill 2060 funds out into the community.
And there will be an extensive training on that in the January CAB meeting.
Wonderful. Thank you. More to come.
Okay, so do we need to move on to the other portion of the finance report, or did that cover everything you wanted to cover?
That was great. Thank you. I was really, Michael hit it up that if there were any concerns with contract outputs or expenditures, that there's already a process in place where you would bring that to the CAAB.
What happens in the month it's not used?
So all funds that are not expended by the program are recaptured and then reallocated out into future contracts that we have. One of the examples that's been discussed is the Clark College contract. They significantly underspent. The reason they significantly underspent, the funds that they underspent were the housing HSF funds. They were used for emergency grants. They received additional COVID-related community service block grant funds, along with other grants that were COVID-related that they used for the emergency grants because they had tighter timelines and restrictions on those. And so they ended up underspending in the emergency grants they needed for our primary funding, our normal funding. And because it was our local funds, we were able to recapture those, and then they'll be reallocated out.
Is that the same like with the Clark County Latino?
Can you guys speak up in the boardroom? I'm unable to hear you from a virtual.
You got masks here.
So Amy's asking, just verifying that all the others that were underspent those funds will be recaptured. And yes, we constantly evaluate, especially with the Treasury Rent Assistance programs. Those are outreach dollars that are allocated out to buy and for organizations. And sometimes they spend them all out, sometimes they don't, depending on what type of outreach they do. We are constantly looking at that and then providing additional outreach opportunities or ways for those funds to be spent either by that same agency or by another agency that may be doing more outreach. And so that we can verify and assure that all of the funds that we receive get allocated out into the community in some sort of service.
So is there a process for, sorry.
Oh, go ahead, Bridget.
So is there a process for reallocation where it comes back to the board to review where the monies are going as we did in the initial allocation?
This is Beth. I just wanted to add in a note. So any funds that we are able to reallocate, because not all funds we're able to reallocate, say if they have an expiration date, and so we have that spending priority. So if we get to, for CHG, our contract ends 6/30/23. So if we don't spend all our CHG dollars, the state will recollect those and we lose them, which is why we monitor that spending, address any concerns, and are pretty active with our agencies. For the funds that we can reallocate, if they've been underspent, those are always reallocated to existing contracts so that we're supporting the work that has been approved by CAAB and is already in place. We've never really had a situation where we're able to come back to the CAAB and say, none of our contract partners have a shortfall, or that's not the situation. So they're always reallocated to current contracts.
Yeah, I would just say, so short answer, Bridget, yes, there is a process that is in place when it comes to fund reallocation. And what we are talking about right now is contract program management. We're not talking about, big picture funding allocations. So when, there is not the case that funds are recaptured, they're sitting somewhere, and staff decide to allocate it to some future contract that we don't know about. Funds that are reallocated are basically reallocated into another existing contract in almost real time. And these are the contracts that the CAAB has approved for funding over that period, that the activity has been reviewed and approved for funding by the CAAB, and any changes that happen become reflected in these revenue and expense reports that we provide to the CAAB. So there are no reallocations that happen or contracting activities that happen that haven't come to the CAAB in some way or that are not being reported to the CAAB. And honestly, it would be, if we wanted to create a process where there were CAAB discussions for doing this kind of reallocations that we're talking about, it really would not be viable, especially with the CAAB board meeting once every other month. We would have to have contracts on hold before we could do modifications that would just make it impossible to spend out the funds and the deadlines that we have to spend them out for the state and the federal government.
Yeah, I understand, and flexibility is good. I was just thinking around, well, first of all, the choice between the other contracts that come under that. So if you're reallocating to an existing contract, you're making a decision about which of the existing contracts you will add to. And the second thing is, I know funding never covers all the costs of a program, and you supplement it with whatever donations or grants you can get. But we don't ever change, if there was a larger sum to be reallocated and it went to a program, we don't, or do we, change the outcomes requested that we think that money can provide?
We do.
Okay, that's it.
So I think, Michael, the commitment from the county team to ensure that any reallocation of funds and that decision that is made is brought forward to the CAAB in the form of just a report out, versus the CAAB having a part in determining what contract is going to receive those reallocated monies. So I think just hearing that there will be a commitment from the county to ensure that this board is kept up to speed is sufficient. Are there any other questions regarding the financial report? We're about 8 minutes over. I want to allow time because this is a very important topic, but I also want to be sensitive to our day and keep us on time. So we'll go ahead and move to the revenue report.
Okay, revenue report. This will show any funds flowing into community services, whether it be federal, state, or local. We do have the local funds broken out into 2 fiscal years, and it does say HB only, which those are our House bill, the document recording fees only. The reason they are broken out this way is because the market does change. We don't know exactly what's going to be collected on the document recording fees. So we do collect a fiscal year and then contract those out for the following fiscal year. So when you see the fiscal 21 revenue for House bill only, those were document recording fees from July of 2020 through June of 21 that are then put into our 21-22 contracts. And then revenue collected from 21 to 22 is put into our current year, the 22 to 23 contracts. And that is only done with our House bill funds because we don't know what the collections are going to be until after that fiscal year of collections is determined. Grant revenue, that's given to us in a full, it's not given to us in a full amount, but the awarded amount is provided to us by our funding source so that we know how much we will have in that fiscal year. So you'll see the column for the grant revenue over to the right. And if you want to look as far as collections for the House bill, if you'll go up one page, please, Rebecca. Collections as of right now are down in comparison to previous years, and that's all dependent on the housing market and the recording fees being collected and the portion that comes to community services. It's broken down into the 2060, 2163, and 1359, just like we allocate them out for the contracts.
Scroll down, Rebecca. I'm sorry, I have my screen blown up here. I can't. There we go. Okay.
And we do have some extra little notes down here. House bills are collected at least 1 year prior to allocating them in contracts. And then because we do say local, state, and federal, local funds are normally a calendar year, but we do contract on a fiscal year to follow because those funds are put into our state contracts that follow a state fiscal year. State fiscal year is July to June, federal fiscal year is October to September, and 100% of these funds are always committed into our 3-year RFA process. We do our best in forecasting the local funds because it is a 3-year RFA process. If funds are more than forecasted, we do adjust those into contracts that have been approved through the RFA process. If there's less than, then we kind of need to take a step back and really have a discussion on where, or if we have some other funds that we can move around to cover the contracts. Any questions on the revenue reports?
Thank you so much to our finance team. Very well done. And I'm assuming you'll send those out to us after the meeting.
Correct. And then they will be posted on the Community Services website, available for anyone to go out and look at.
And then I'll just really quickly, so these charts will also be in the presentation that gets emailed out to you, but it's the same charts that we used last time, just updated for full year, fiscal year expenditures. This is just showing in orange our treasury dollars versus our what we call normal dollars, our regular ongoing dollars, and what their expenditures look like. This breaks down the expenditures by different intervention type, rent assistance types versus data and collection and community action. This is just a different way of looking at where the funds are going in those different categories based on what is our regular funds versus what is COVID related funds expended over the last fiscal year. This breaks down what was received between local, state, and federal. This is both regular and COVID funding. This one is looking at the revenue collected in those different categories: COVID, our homeless crisis response system, and community action. And the final point that we wanted to make on the finance reports is that each year we need to notify the board about the county's audit. It's available through this portal. The most recent report was issued on September 26th for the calendar year ending December 31st, 2021. There were 2 findings identified, but both were for funds overseen by public health, not anything within our department. So there's no updates to provide you based on what those findings are or how they're being corrected.
Thank you. So we're going to go ahead and move along in our agenda. We have a space for the CNA task force update, and that goes to you, Rebecca.
Yes, so our Community Needs Assessment Task Force had their first meeting in October. It was more of a meet and greet and getting to know all of the new task force members and giving them a general overview of what is going to be their responsibilities as task force members. Amy and Melanie are both on the task force. At our next meeting, we'll designate one of them to be the person to speak with the board at our regular meeting so that they can provide you this update about what is happening on the task force itself. But I just wanted to let you know that it is up and going and underway, and we will be working on the next community needs assessment for the next 18 months.
And Diana, I see you have your hand up.
Yes, thank you. Just a quick question. I saw JS put in the chat that she said reports are available on the CAAB website. Is it possible to put a link to that CAAB website in the chat? And then also, will that include the PowerPoint delivered by Talia?
Yes, so the entire PowerPoint presented along with all meeting documentations will be on the CAAB website. I can send you the link to that. We'll also talk about it at the orientation.
Thank you.
Very good. And I know we've been using chat today. Fortunately, we don't have anyone joining us by phone, but typically during our meetings, we won't use the chat as an option because it doesn't allow accessibility for people that are phoning in. And we want to make sure all information is accessible to everyone who's participating. But with that, we will go ahead and go to our Legislative Advocacy Committee update. And I know that I have not been actively involved in that committee. It's kind of been on a pause, but I know Amy's been active. So she's going to provide just a quick report on any work that she's been doing at the federal or state level.
Yeah, I sent out the email to Washington Low Income Housing Alliance because that's who we followed last year, what they were doing. And so I'm waiting for an email back. There's really not any bills set in stone yet or anything that's legislative. Yeah, but I'm waiting. Does anybody else want to be on the committee this year? I'm like, is it?
Great question. So the committee meets regularly during the legislative session in order to track and follow bills and to sign in support or in opposition of bills based on the mission of the CAAB. So if anyone is interested in learning more, you can reach out to me or Rob or Karen or Amy, and we'd be happy to share and get you signed up to participate.
Is there a way to, Lisa, that before this starts, that you could show me how to do that cool little, you know?
Yeah, we can set some time aside, Amy. I'd be happy to do that.
Okay, thank you.
Welcome. Okay, any other questions or updates from folks on the board about legislation? Okay, hearing none, we'll go ahead and move on to CAB membership. Rebecca.
Yes. So it's been a while. We've had several vacancies on the board, but we were waiting for the county to go through the process after the last vote to update the CAAB or the county council to 5 districts. We waited for the district map to get approved. It finally got approved, and then we started advertising for some positions. We actually have 8 positions that are open for applications. 3 of those are positions by current CAAB members that are up for reappointment. We received applications for 4 of those 8 open positions. And so I will be working with, what I need actually is to have a small committee. As I mentioned earlier, typically we would have the executive team review applications for appointments onto the board, but one of our executive team members is one of the applicants that was up for reappointment. So I'm looking for a small group of maybe 3 board members to work with me to make the review applications, resumes, and possibly do interviews so that we can move the 4 applicants or 4 positions forward that we currently have. And then I will re-advertise for the positions that we are still needing to fill. So do I have any volunteers for the review committee?
I'm happy to help.
Bridget. Do we have 1 or 2 other members?
The time commitment for the project is however long it takes you to review the application that, same application that you filled out when you're on the board, and possibly interviews depending on how many applications that we have. And that will be determined by the review committee if they want to move any applicants to an interview process.
Does the interview have to be in person or could someone do it?
No, and the interviews will likely be virtual, just to make it easier for people to access the meeting itself.
It's over the next 2 months.
Hopefully we will have them, the first round of the current applicants that we have right now reviewed by mid-December so that we can get them appointed by January 1st. So I imagine it would be maybe 2 to 3 hours of time for this review committee.
Okay.
Rob, would you like to join Bridget?
I'll join. Yes.
Thank you, Rob. So we have Rob and Bridget. Let's see. Do you need any more than 2, Rebecca?
It would be fantastic if you'd be available. You'll be doing the letter to send to the county council for their appointments, if that's possible.
Yep, you can add me to it. So we have 3 members. Okay, thank you so much for volunteering, Bridget and Rob. And we will go ahead and move to our open forum. If there are any members of the public that are with us today that would like to address the CAAB board, now is your time. Feel free to unmute yourself and come forward. Are there any members of the public here that wishes to speak? Going once? Going twice, 3rd time, any members of the public? Okay, hearing nobody that wants to speak during open forum, we'll go ahead and close the open forum and we'll move to other business. Just as a reminder, our January CAAB meeting is going to be split between 2 days, January 4th from 9 a.m. until noon, and Thursday, January 5th, 9 a.m. to 1 p.m. This is a very important meeting. I'm hoping all CAAB members can join so we can go through our annual training, updates, and just make sure we're all setting a good footing for the new year. And it will be my last meeting as chair, so we'll have to do something to celebrate. Is there anything for good of the order, Rebecca or county team?
Just a question on the January meeting. Is that in person?
So all board meetings are hybrid, so you can attend either virtually or in person, and they'll be at our building, this location, the Center for Community Health, and our main conference rooms A and B.
And maybe for Alicia's leaving, we could have a cake.
Ooh, or some donuts. Yeah, I'll be in
Donuts are
person.
better. Yeah, in person would be really nice to see everyone again.
Yeah,
So
that sounds
Alicia,
fun.
you're leaving CAB or you're just stepping down from being chair?
Yeah, I've been chair for 3 years on the executive committee, so I can't be chair anymore. So I'll still be on the CAB.
Gotcha. Okay.
But she could be vice chair or secretary.
Yes,
That would
I
just
can't be
dictate
chair.
the size of donuts to bring.
Okay, well, hearing no other items for the good of the order, we'll go ahead and adjourn our meeting. Thank you, everyone, for being here, and thank you so much for the great reports.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank
See
you,
you in
everyone.
January.